Good afternoon and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot. Every Friday I talk a bit about mental health. It's particularly depression, but bipolar as well. Just happen to have them both, and OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. Everywhere a list, nothing can be missed. That's obsessive compulsive. If you have this compunction to turn cans around to face forward in your pantry, and not a single one can be out of place, and you scrub light switches and have them sparkly clean all the time, you may be going down that track, my friend. That's the sort of things that you do, and that's telltale signs. And these days you've got the internet, so you can look it up and you can see the telltale signs of somebody's behaviour and tell pretty much, oh yeah, okay, I recognise those flags. And I remember when I first sought help for depression and for bipolar, I read all these flags and I thought, yes. Oh my giddy aunt, okay. And there is no other, there is only one you. So everything you think, everything you feel, you think is normal. And at some point of time, you think, no, this isn't just, feeling down. This is feeling so down that you just don't want to continue. It's at that point that you got to do something. And I had mates say to me, oh, just harden up, man, just harden up. And no, it's not the way to go. Look, you've got to see a doctor, you've got to get some decent drugs, make sure you're sleeping well. If that means you've got to take, drugs to get you to sleep, Zopiclone or whatever, if that's what needs to be done, do it. Don't do it long term. Those damn things are addictive, but you do what you've got to do to get the ship steering right again, because you've gone off track and the wheels are coming off. You've got to get it sorted, and then this is just me personally, and this is something you're going to have to discuss with your doctor and maybe even a psychiatrist, but try and button off the drugs, down, and even wean yourself off if you can eventually, because what you've got to remember is things like depression, for most, not for all, but for most, it is a recoverable illness. So, if you know anyone suffering from depression, you've just got to be that difference maker. And if you can say a kind word every now and then, you don't have to be a saint, you don't have to bend over backwards for them, just a kind word every now and then. Be thoughtful and considerate towards them, and it'll make a huge difference in their lives, And one nasty word can just send them into a spiral, down. So think about what you say, I'm not saying lie to them or treat them with kid gloves necessarily, but try and pick the positive things to say and emphasise those. Right, well, I've got a long song to play you today, something real different, really nice. I have quite an eclectic taste. So we're going to rattle on with today's story, which is Gallipoli in Istanbul. And this is in recognition of Armistice Day, which was on Sunday, I do realise, because I kind of went there, to the War Memorial and that. And on the way home, I got a commemorative 50-cent piece. I don't know if they're in public circulation or what, but it was really special to get it. And it is something else. And it reminded me of when I went to Belgium and to Turkey. And this is one of the stories that came out of it, Gallipoli in Istanbul. Here we go. My good friend Wayne and I hitchhiked our way around the Aegean coast from Greece to Turkey. We first headed down to the small town of Conakry, which is near the beach we refer to as Gallipoli. We met up with a guy called David who ran his home as a hostel for travellers, especially Kiwis and Aussies. David was a fantastic host and arranged a taxi ride over the hill to where the great battle for Chunuk Bair occurred. Wayne and I didn't know what to expect, so we were amazed to find the place left pretty much unchanged from those terrible days when so many young men had perished. There was a small museum temporarily manned by an old geezer, some well-tended graves at the top of the hill, and a large stone plaque from the tomb of President Ataturk. In the most respectful terms, it is written there for all to see. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us where they lay side by side, here in this country of ours. You the mothers, who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Ataturk, 1934. Apart from this plaque, the graves and museum, very little had changed from those terrible days when the abortive landings had taken place. Down on the beach there were thousands of corroded shell casings and bullets lying everywhere. Many of these have been taken as souvenirs by tourists and are quickly disappearing as a result. Up on the beach was an area called the Pines, where many of the Australian boys had been slaughtered, both by friendly fire and the fierce resistance the Turks had showed. At the time, a simple unsealed road led up the hills of Chunuk Bair, where the Indians and Kiwis had been decimated. There were open trenches all over the place. Undisturbed from the time those poor boys had fallen, the trenches were full of skulls, legs and arm bones protruding from the earth. As the land grew steeper, the number of bones increased and tears flowed freely as I touched them gently. Despite the incredibly steep and exposed terrain, the Kiwis managed to force the Turks off the tops, were forced back, then took it a second time, only to be hurled off a second time before a truce being declared. I did not believe in ghosts until that day, but the eerie emptiness of this open graveyard moved me as never before. After spending the best part of a day at Gallipoli, we headed back to Conakry, where through David I met up with one of the last Turkish survivors of the campaign. He heaped praise on his old enemies for their fierceness and tenacity, especially the Kiwis. He told me of the extreme hardships they all had to endure, freezing winter and blistering summer, in trenches so close they could hear each other talking. It was quite overwhelming to hear of his hardships, and humbling to hear his great respect he held for his old enemy. After a very pleasant and moving stay at Conakry, we headed back up the peninsula and eastward on to Istanbul. This magnificent city on the Golden Horn is split in half by the Bosphorus Strait. On one side lies the new part of the city, with its high rises and western trappings like McDonald's. Fittingly enough, it is on the western bank and emphasises Turkey's wish to join the European Union. All right, take a little bit of a break there and I will play you good old Tom. You'll like this.
Wasted and wounded, it ain't what the moon did. God, would I paid for now? See you tomorrow, if Frank can I borrow a couple of bucks from you to go waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you go waltzing an innocent victim of a blinded alley, and I'm tired of all these soldiers here. No one speaks English and everything's broken, and my stasis are soaking wet. To go waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you go waltzing Matilda with me. Now the dogs are barking and the taxi cab's parking. A lot they can do for me. I begged you to stab me, you tore my shirt open, and I'm down on my knees tonight. Old Bushmills, I staggered, you buried the dagger, your silhouette window light. To go waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you go waltzing Matilda with me. Now I lost my St. Christopher, now that I've kissed her, and the one-armed bandit knows, and the maverick Chinaman in the cold-blooded signs, and the girls down by the striptease shows go waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you go waltzing Matilda with me. No, I don't want your sympathy. The fugitives say that the streets aren't for dreaming now. Manslaughter, dragnets, and the ghosts that sell memories. They want a piece of the action anyhow. Go waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you go waltzing Matilda with me. And you can ask any sailor, and the keys from the jailer, and the old men in wheelchairs know that Matilda's the defendant. She killed about 100, and she follows wherever you may go. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you go waltzing Matilda with me.
Welcome back to The Road to Freedom, The Road to Recovery with Mark. I hope you enjoyed that. That was Tom Waits, and you know, I love the fact that he's accompanied by a piano and a violin, and that's Tom tinkling the ivories. Even when he's pissed as, he's pretty accomplished, I think you'll agree. Something a little different. I have quite an eclectic taste, so it's nice to be able to share with you some of my more favourite little sounds. Okay, let's crack on with it. This is Gallipoli in Istanbul, and this is just in memory of Armistice Day. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we finally got peace. They called it the war to end all wars. Unfortunately, it never panned out that way, but you know, we lost an entire generation, and it exhausted destroyed, brought to an end the Victorian Empire. The sun set on the empire that made this country as far as its Pākehā new life is concerned, its new name. I like the fact that we now recognise it as Aotearoa New Zealand, and just as a little nod to the first people here. So we must never forget them either. Without them, we are nothing, just like Tom Waits without that piano. Nah, it just wouldn't work, would it? So, you know, we have a diverse culture here, a rich culture, and we're very lucky to have it, and it's nice to be part of it and do my own little bit for what I can for the people who are suffering from mental health, you know. I like to think I do my bit. Righto, let's crack on with it. The Eastern Bank, however, is the Byzantium and Constantinople of old. It still retains some of the old Topkapi Palace walls from the Ottomans. Also the magnificent St. Sophia Byzantium period church. Erected at the height of the Byzantium period, it boasted the largest dome of any church for over 1,000 years. Below St. Sophia's, towards the Eastern Bank, the dilapidated old buildings lean on each other like drunks. We stayed on the rooftop of one of these dodgy old places directly below the Blue Mosque, which sits in magnificence further up the hill. I walked up from our dodgy lodgings to St. Sophia's and spent a few hours in its pleasant cool on a blistering hot day. From there I walked up to a quadrant outside the incredible Blue Mosque. With its 6 gigantic minarets, its overall size is hard to take in. Entering the Blue Mosque, having first washed hands and feet in the cool water and covering from wrist to ankle, is a religious experience in itself. The eye is drawn to the heavens by the untold thousands of beautiful handmade turquoise tiles, the bright light of God at their epicentre. It was impossible to take it all in with one glance. I found myself bowing my head naturally in order to take in the magnificence of this labour of love. The sheer scale only added to the potency of its message. The peace and serenity of this cool sanctuary was most welcome on a hot afternoon. Outside is a quadrant which houses one of the 4 Cleopatra's needles taken from Egypt during the height of empire. The others are located on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, the Embankment on the Thames in London, and the Washington Monument in the United States. Strange how the symbols of power are reused by the next great power. These so-called needles are obelisks of stone, tapering from bottom to top and finishing to a point at the top. Beautiful and huge in their own right, they are symbols of ancient power which are enhanced by their new surroundings, especially in Istanbul. At night there was a sound and light show outside the Blue Mosque which lit it up like a castle from ancient times. This spectacular show transported the crowd back in time, to a time when great sultans ruled over this magnificent city and brought light and civilization into an otherwise dark world. The mighty Ottoman Empire slowly ground to a halt, finally collapsing at the hands of the invading Nazis during World War II. After the show, I headed back to our accommodation and got off to sleep with the help of the local hooch called Raki. At first light, the morning calling to prayer broke out across the old city via speakers on the minarets of the mosques. Haunting and beautiful, it is an experience that stays with you for a lifetime. In the cool air and beautiful light of the morning, I walked up the hill to Topkapi Museum. Housed in the ruins of the old castle are many priceless works of art and precious gems. Among these is the Topkapi diamond, a huge, beautiful stone that defies belief. Not as large as the Cullinan diamond used in the British Crown jewels, it is nonetheless an otherworldly clarity to it. It refracts the light so well it almost seems liquid. Also housed there are emeralds the size of dinner plates. Just a tiny fraction of the Sultan's treasures remain. Yet what remains is such a beautiful and impressive collection it only sparks the imagination. There is also a collection of Ming Dynasty pottery, so huge that the senses begin to blur on looking at it, reminiscent of the tales of the Arabian Nights. I could easily imagine a great castle on the hill, full of great piles of treasure. By the very nature of the development of the city, it is impossible to rebuild what has fallen into disrepair. The ruins, however, only enhance the beauty and mystique of the old city. I left Topkapi Palace in the heat of the afternoon and headed down a street called Divignol seeking shade. I came across a smoking cafe where the locals in their traditional loose clothes sat to while away a hot afternoon. The idea of this cafe was that you purchase a huge stub of tobacco for 100 or so lira. You are then waited upon by waiters who carry around hot coals on a plate. These are placed on the stub and put in a huge water pipe. The beautiful hookah pipes, as they are called, have a number of hoses and mouthpieces coming from them, so the experience can be shared amongst friends. They also serve hot sweet tea, called simply chai. It comes with no milk, instead they serve water with the tea. The cafe itself is an open courtyard, protected from the sun by high walls. The tables, chairs and floors are solid granite, and it is refreshingly cool. Old men sit around with friends, chatting and puffing on their pipes. As I watch them, I am transcended in time and imagine the same scene having played itself out for centuries. Even sitting on my own, smoking and watching was an extremely pleasant way to spend an afternoon. Despite the language barrier, I felt quite accepted. The combination of tea and good tobacco was quite intoxicating. I waited until the burning sun had stooped quite low before wandering down some narrow cobblestone streets. Old men sat on stools at short tables, drinking tea and playing backgammon. Since I had already played the game, I asked an old guy for a game. The language barrier can be overcome with hand signals and a few words. Before long I was being thrashed, but I stuck with it until I could hold my own at the breakneck speed. Backgammon is like a national pastime for men, and we played many enjoyable games. I even won some. We played well into dark that night, and I felt like I had travelled in time, as this time-honoured tradition played itself out. With my first real lesson in backgammon, I headed back down the hill to my rooftop bed. It was only possible to sleep during the small hours. Over the next few days, Wayne and I moved to cheaper accommodation which required a cheap bus ride from just out from the old city centre. We visited other great mosques like Suleiman the Magnificent's around the Golden Horn. We also went to local markets with their exotic foods and spices. The Turks are natural salesmen and always drive a hard bargain. Centuries of trading on the Silk Route seems to have honed their skills, making trading with them great fun. Despite obvious poverty, the city vibrantly bustles with trade. Handmade carpets are a favourite item with the Turks, and they go to great lengths to sell these works of art. The hot summer days of visiting mosques and markets, of smoking hookah pipes, and nights of backgammon passed too quickly. Soon we were off south, down the coast, but the indelible impression of Istanbul stayed with us for the rest of our lives. The end. Wham, look at that, 2 minutes to go. I'll sign you off with a few little thoughts, but I just want to say it was incredibly sad to walk not just through Anzac Cove, the beach, up Chunnock Beer, and on Flanders Fields when the poppies were there, symbolising the life of every young man that fell there. It was a terrible war, an incredible sacrifice made by so many, and it kind of, in some ways, helped to define this nation, and it won Maori, the Maori battalion, great mana. I think not just the Pākehā of this country, I think the whole world saw them in a different light after that. Mana. That was what that was all about for them. I feel very sad. I kind of cut up about thinking about these things. It was a long, long time ago, and it's tough. And things have really changed. Everything has become homogenised. They have buried the bones and flattened out the place and decked the pines and changed the road, and it's completely transformed from what it was, which was basically an open graveyard. I'm talking about Anzac Cove here and Chunnock Bear, all the way up to the tops. It was as rough as guts, and arm bones, skulls. It was just, you have no idea, and you think these are my fellow countrymen, Very moving. An amazing experience, but, you got to take the good and the bad and just try and realise that, you can hold your head up high saying that, those boys really acquitted themselves amazingly well, They are heroes, true heroes. All right, now, just a little bit on mental health before I go. If you know anyone who is suffering from mental health, remember a kind word can make such a difference. And finally, before I go, I just want to say a very big thanks to Michael and Veronica for supporting me on this show. We are looking for a sponsor for this particular show. If you know anyone who's interested, please just give them a call. They'll help you out. It's as cheap as chips, and you get on the TV, on the internet, and on the radio. So you've got a three-pronged attack. You're supporting a not-for-profit organisation and something that is, I think, really worthwhile. I think this is the way of the future. Get involved with your community, support your community, become part of here, not on the internet, not on the ether world, but here and now in your community. That would be appreciated ever so much. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed today. I certainly did, and I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.